All right, let's get started. Hello once again, everyone. My name is Alexey Klochay. I'm a product manager here at CircleCI, and I'm going to be the presenter at today's webinar. So the topic, as you can see, is how to build, test, and deploy React Native projects with CircleCI 2.0. We'll cover a bit more than just that. We'll cover the following points. So first, we'll take a look on what is CircleCI 2.0 and what makes it good for use with React Native specifically. We're going to take a look at interactive debugging, SSH into the build. We're going to take a look at two different types of React Native configuration. We'll have one simpler one and one more complicated config. And then we'll take a look at all available deployment options that you can use with React Native apps on CircleCI. So if you want to follow along in everything that we are doing here, I'm going to paste a link to the chat in a second where you can find the sample repository that we'll be using. This is the link directly to the branch that we'll be using in the webinar. The repo is open source, so feel free to fork it for yourself. And if you want to follow along, that is entirely up to you. Let me share my screen. So we're going to get started by taking a look at CircleCI 2.0 in general. So CircleCI 2.0 is our latest and greatest platform. Signing up is always free. You can do it here if you're still not signed up. The main improvements and new features that we've released in CircleCI 2.0 include custom environments. So now you can define your own environment via Docker and use that in your builds. We have improved caching. There is now many more flexible options with caching different kinds of builds. There are multiple resource types in case that is interesting for you in your build configuration. And the workloads feature allows you to define custom build pipelines that can be very flexible and adaptable to your particular build structure. Part of the workflows feature is what we'll be taking a look here at the webinar. What makes it extremely useful for React Native project is that you can use macOS and Linux builds in the same config file. We'll take a look at the detailed example later. So basically, this workflows feature, together with having macOS and Linux in the same config, and together with the advanced caching, makes a very convenient choice for React Native projects. This is our sample project that is built using React Native. You can take a look at it in our CircleCI public GitHub organization. I also posted a link to the chat. We have a special branch in here, which is webinar. And here, let me make this larger, just in case. So here, this is absolutely basic React Native project. The JavaScript code lives here in the root of the repo, as well as the tests. Here we have the directory with the iOS app, just here, which contains the Xcode project and all of the related things. And we have a separate directory for Android as well that also contains the app here and all of the related files. Here we also have the .circleci directory that contains the CircleCI configuration. This is the config file that we'll be using at first. It is a very simple one, actually. So here we have just one job using workflows. This is the only job that we have right now, which is just configure a macOS environment, check out the code, run Fastlane scan with these two configurations. And that is basically it, and then collect all the test output. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to run a build using this config. We're going to let me push I'm going to push a little change to the repository that I have been making so that we just see the build running here. So once this is pushed, I'm gonna go to the Workflows tab. As you can see, I have already built it a few times. Oh, and here we have our build running. So here, this is a very simple workflow, as I mentioned. It only has this one job. If you have more complicated workflows, you will have many jobs in here in this area. So let's take a look at how this is going. So here we can see the config that will be running again. It's all very simple. We're gonna wait until the build starts, and we'll see how this is building our iOS app. So workflows in general is configured here at the bottom of the config. You can take a look at more details of how it works in our documentation, circleci.com/docs. While this is running, you can take a look at the build output. Oh, the build failed right away. With the import errors, we're gonna take a look at what happened in there. I think I know what happened, but we're gonna rerun this job with SSH and log into the container so that we can debug this error. So basically, we tried running Fastlane scan, and it all failed right away with the import errors. I think this is because we just didn't run the, oh, of course, we didn't run the dependency step for our React Native dependencies. So here, Fastlane scan doesn't, by default, install all the JavaScript dependencies. So now we're going to rerun this with SSH and see how running the dependency step. Well, it's already running. So let me grab the SSH command here. I'm gonna copy this, paste it into my terminal. I will share my terminal screen in 1 second. Let me share my terminal screen. Should be able to see my terminal now. All right, we're inside the build here, the job. As you can see, it still failed, so we're gonna go into the project directory, and under it, we're gonna go into the iOS. Oh, actually, we're gonna run the dependency step in here. So we're just gonna run yarn to install all of our dependencies. This should take only a few seconds. There is very few dependencies in this project. Once this finishes, we're gonna go into the iOS subdirectory and try running the same command that we were running before. Once again, boom, it's finished. We're gonna go into the iOS subdirectory. We're gonna pass the same configuration that is used here in the job, and we're gonna try running this once again. So it looks like, please let me know using the Q&A feature in this webinar if you have any questions about what I'm doing. I see that there's already a few questions. So first of all, can I build this test repo on CircleCI myself? Yes, absolutely. Feel free to go to the link that I posted in the chat and fork that repo and add it to CircleCI. As I said, sign up is free, so you can just sign up and build your own fork right away. There's another question in here. Which SSH key is used for the SSH feature? So we get your public keys from GitHub when you sign up for CircleCI. So when you hit the rerun job with SSH button, we add the public keys that we found on GitHub. We add them to the build. So you basically will use the same SSH key that you use to connect to GitHub. You will use it for the SSH into your build feature, which is convenient because for most people, that will be their primary SSH key. And that makes SSH into the build just really fast and easy. As we can see here, the compilation step for our app continues for now. We're gonna, now we can see that it compiles successfully. We no longer have the import errors, which is great. So the whole issue was that we forgot to run the dependency step. It was very, very handy to just be able to SSH into the build and run the step that we wanted to try right away. Interactive debugging is very convenient. So once, let's see how this finishes. I think it's almost done. Let's see if this is finishing soon. Oh, there's another question here. How do I set up code signing with CircleCI? I'm going to talk about that in just about 15 seconds. Once this finishes, we're going to switch back to my browser and going to take a look at the more complex example that also configures the code signing. Okay, so the tests are almost running. Yep, the build succeeded this time. We're gonna go back into the browser and take a look at the more complex example that's going to be more interesting. Let me switch to the browser window. Boom. All right, so here we're back to the browser window. Let me cancel the SSH build that was running so that we don't keep it running. Cool, so here there were two config files that we discussed before. This is the simple config file that we used to run the simple example. Now we're gonna take a look at the more complex example with the workflows. So here, instead of just everything being a single job, we have everything a bit more optimized for React Native. So first of all, we have a build job that just builds and tests the JavaScript code. So it installs the dependencies here and then runs the JavaScript tests here. What it will also do is it will store the node modules directory into the workspace so that we can reuse that directory in other jobs later on. It will also store the test results. And then we will have a Android job that will run in Docker this time, and it will use Fastlane to run the Android steps. So it looks like there's one second. There's an active question. Let me answer it. So there was an initial build failure in CircleCI config for this repo, or did it have another cause? Yes, there was a. I forgot to include the yarn install step in the config, and so then I just SSH'd and ran the yarn install step, and everything was fine again. So we could potentially go back to the simple example and just add the yarn install or just yarn step before Fastlane scan, and everything should work just fine. There's another question here. The persist to workspace option in the build job makes the data available through different steps in the workflows, even on different machines, Linux versus iOS. Yes. So when we run persist to workspace here, we can restore the workspace via attach workspace anywhere. In an Android job, in a Docker job, in a machine job, in a macOS job, everywhere. The only caveat here is that macOS containers use a different version of yarn that the Docker containers here use. So here and here in these two jobs, the version of yarn is the same, while here the version of yarn can be different. And so I chose to not restore node modules from the workspace here in this macOS job specifically. But in Android, yes, it's going to use the node modules that were generated here in this job. What's the benefit of using CircleCI versus Fastlane when Fastlane can also do builds? So we're actually using Fastlane here for build automation. As you can see, we're using the Fastlane test lane. Fastlane is a tool that helps you automate the whole build process. On CircleCI, you can also do things like workflows, right? You can do multi-stage builds. You can also do the orchestration of the whole build process. You can also, the point of CircleCI is that you no longer run the Fastlane build on your machine, but rather you run it in the cloud environment that we provide. The benefits of the cloud environment is that we guarantee that the machines are clean every time you run a build. So for example, these steps will run in a clean environment, and there is no chance that something that you have done on your machine will affect the outcome. Same for macOS. macOS builds are run on a clean virtual machine every time, which means that if there is an issue with one of the install steps, you will see it in the CI environment. There's another question here. With persistent workspace, won't the node modules there have to have different native dependencies on different platforms? Yes, that is a very good point. And I would guess that that is the actual reason why it didn't work the first time I tried it out. That is absolutely correct. So in this case, I guess it might make sense to just use the workspace for the Android build, and maybe just better to install Yarn dependencies here separately on macOS. That's a very great one. Thank you. So let's see. This is a slightly more complicated macOS job than the one that we were looking at in the previous example. Here we use bundle to install all the iOS all the dependencies defined in the iOS folder in the gem file. You can take a look at it in the iOS folder, and then that means that we can specify which version of Fastlane do we want to use. So here that is the main difference, and then we also store the scan test results. That is going to be generated in this directory. We store it in the build artifacts. We also store the test results. And here we can see the workflow configuration. So here the jobs are the build job will always be run on each push to GitHub. But then Android and iOS jobs will only be run when the build job succeeds. So when the build jobs finishes running and is successful, only then we'll start running iOS and Android jobs, which means that we will detect errors early. So if there is an issue with our JavaScript code, we'll see that in the build job, and then Android and iOS will just not run for this push. And then we'll fix the issue with JavaScript code, push again, and boom, everything is running again. So let's go back to the terminal. So this example is now called config workflows.yaml. To be able to use this config, we need to rename it into just config YAML. I'm going to go back to the terminal. Let me see here. I'm going to go back here. I'm just going to go into the CircleCI directory, and I'm going to rename just move the current config, the simple config. I'm going to move it into the file that I will call just simple config. And then I'm going to move the workflows config into just being the main config this time. Let's see if everything looks good. Yes, this looks good. Actually, while we are here, we're going to try and see if we can run this job using the CLI. So CircleCI provides a command line tool, CircleCI, that you can check out our documentation for instructions for installing it. So we can try and use it to run the build job, for example. Yeah, just like that. Oh, that didn't work because I tried to run it inside the CircleCI folder, of course. Boom. Let's try it like this. As you can see, this will now pull all the containers that are required to run this build, and will run the job the same way as it would run on CircleCI.com, so you can get faster feedback while you are changing the configuration, for example. You can also run the Android build locally. I really don't think it would be optimal to wait until we download all the Android dependencies right now. So maybe you can do that on your own if you're interested. I'm going to cancel this for now. We're going to push this change to add and commit this change. 1 second. And we're going to push this to GitHub. And let me switch back to the browser. So here, let's go back to the project here. We're going to go to the workflows page. And now we have a different workflow running. Before we were running the workflow called build and test, and now that's the Node, Android, iOS workflow. This one has more steps, as we have seen previously in the config. So now we have the build job running that runs the JavaScript test, and then we'll go and run the Android and iOS jobs. This one is passed, and so now these two jobs will get triggered in a second. So yarn ran, everything was saved to the workspace. Let's go back here. Cool, and so now we have the Android job here and the iOS job that are running separately, but in parallel. So basically, in GitHub, we will have, in a PR, for example, we'll have 3 different statuses for each of these jobs, which can be very useful. So now this will run the jobs that we discussed before, using Fastlane in Android and using Fastlane on iOS as well, macOS. That will take some time to complete. So this might be a great moment to also answer any other questions that you may have. Oh, there's one. Take a look. Do you have examples for just iOS without Android? Yes. So here in our GitHub CircleCI public org, there are multiple examples. There's the React Native one, but there is also an iOS one here. This is just a native iOS app without React Native. So you can take a look on how that is configured, and there is a Fastlane, there is fast file and gem file and app file all checked in. You can take a look if you would like to just copy the configuration. So yeah, this is the other sample project that we have. Great. So while this is running, are there any other questions? If so, please submit them in the Q&A feature. All right, let's see how this finished. That's great. So right now, let's see what's the status of this. Also, the Android job finished, and let's see how the iOS job is doing. Looks like it's building everything. Yeah, this is going to take slightly longer than the Android part. I'm going to keep this page open to keep track of that. In the meanwhile, I wanted to mention that there are examples of how to use Fastlane in CircleCI. So somebody was asking before of how to use Fastlane and whether to use Fastlane and whether not to use it, in which cases. So we have iOS-specific documents in our docs page that you can check out. There's a section called example configuration for Fastlane. So here we show which kinds of configuration you can add to your fast file to make the experience better on CircleCI. There is some config examples that you can just copy, adapt, and paste for yourself. There is also an option for running deployments in your workflow. So for example, here, instead of just building Android and iOS, you could also have a deploy job for both platforms. So for example, once you merge a branch into, let's say, master or develop, you could deploy to beta users via Fastlane as well. So we recommend using Fastlane for deployment, and basically that would look like just another job like this, for example, called ad hoc, where The Fastlane lane is ad hoc, and the lane actually does the deployment to TestFlight, for example, or any other service of your choice. And you can configure this to be run, for example, only on the development branch. There's multiple examples on how to set up deployments for beta here in the Fastlane docs, so docs.fastlane.tools. Please check it out. There's lots of useful information in here. I also wanted to mention that we have a separate code signing doc that you might want to take a look at. We support using Fastlane Match for it, which makes sense if you're already using Fastlane or willing to try. I recommend that you take a look at it as well. There's some other questions. Let me take a look. Is there an officially supported node-based CLI for CircleCI? I'd love to put a CircleCI config validate command as a pre-commit step. So it's the CLI is not based in Node, it's written in Go. I think you should be able to do the pre-commit step. I would suggest that you actually ask us after the fact. We'll be happy to help you out. If you just email support with this question, that would be great. Because I'm actually very curious about the answer as well. I'm gonna try and get it set up for you. I'm comparing a Microsoft App Center as well for my React Native apps. What are the benefits of using CircleCI instead? So one of the things that we decided to do here at CircleCI is that we support Fastlane by default. So Fastlane, for example, is installed in your macOS build machines, which means that you can use, if you're using Fastlane locally, you can also use Fastlane on CI, which provides for more consistent experience between development and CI. There's other benefits as the Workflows feature, for example, has lots of options that you can take a look at here in our Workflows document. There's lots of options. I would suggest that you take a look at this. Is there a way to trigger a deploy manually? Absolutely. So we support something which is a manual approval step with the Workflows. So in the Workflows doc, you will find the section. Basically here, we have a special step type, which is hold. You can just add it to your config.yaml, and it will wait for you to go back into the user interface here on the Workflows page and click approve for you to be able to continue building the workflow. Are there webhook integrations for workflows that run across different machines? So what you can do is you can certainly emit webhooks from different containers yourself. So for example, if you have your own server that you would like to send hooks to, you can totally use a curl command, for example, to do that in each of your jobs, but I'm not sure if that is exactly what you're wondering about. The other option is we will automatically send webhooks to GitHub every time each job finishes. So you will see the status for both your iOS and Android jobs in your GitHub pull request, for example. Please let me know if that answers your question. If not, I'll be happy to answer again. So looks like everything has finished here. Yep. Our iOS job took slightly longer, but produced everything that we wanted to produce. So here, for example, we should have all the reports and the build logs that we might be interested in. Great. These are all the steps that I wanted to walk through today. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. If you have any other questions, please let me know right away. We're also happy to answer your questions in our support side and with our support team. Please, if you have any questions during the setup process or after the webinar, please go to support.circleci.com and submit a question. Are there any other questions that I can answer right now? Let's wait for a few seconds. And yeah, absolutely, very welcome. Thank you for joining in. Thanks so much. I guess we will end here, and looking forward to seeing you all on our platform. Thank you.